We live in interesting times for the headlines. Investment and trade agreements valued at $12.6 million were sealed between the Philippines and Russia during President Duterte's visit to Moscow. Pro-democracy protesters marched through Hong Kong in defiance of a ban on face masks. Democratic lawmakers demand that the White House turn over documents related to allegations that President Donald Trump pressured Ukraine for political flavors.
Donald Trump.
A curfew is lifted over Baghdad after days of deadly anti-government protests, which have left almost 100 dead, but tensions remain after powerful Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadir calls on the government to resign. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. Hong Kong's mass transit rail system was suspended and dozens of banks and shopping malls were closed on Saturday after a ban on pro-democracy protesters wearing face masks came into effect, sparking widespread anger and violent clashes. The ban, imposed under emergency powers not used in more than half a century, was aimed at quelling nearly 4 months of unrest, but instead triggered mass protests and vows of defiance, with a 14-year-old boy reportedly shot and wounded. Spontaneous rallies broke out across Hong Kong after Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced the emergency law on Friday, with large crowds of office workers initially blocking roads in the heart of the central commercial district. Demonstrators later vandalized subway stations, started street fires, and then smashed the windows of pro-China businesses as clashes erupted throughout the evening. Police used tear gas in multiple locations to disperse the protesters who had taken over the roads. The entire subway network was suspended, leaving protesters, locals, and Friday night revelers stranded. Hong Kong's embattled leader on Saturday condemned the protesters who trashed the subway stations and shops the night before as rioters who had left much of the strife-torn city frightened and paralyzed. Let's listen in.
各位市民，全港各區昨晚發生咗極為恐怖嘅暴力事件，蒙面暴徒極端嘅行為令人震驚。暴徒嘅極端行為令香港昨晚度過咗非常黑暗嘅一夜，令今日嘅香港社會陷於半癱瘓。大家都好擔心、憂慮，甚至恐懼。特區政府將以最大嘅決心壓止暴力。我呼籲大家支持特區政府依法制暴，一齊譴責暴力，以堅定嘅意志同暴徒割席。
Chief Executive Carrie Lam also said she made the order of banning masks under the Emergency Regulations Ordinances, a sweeping provision that grants her the ability to bypass the legislature and make any new law or any law during a time of emergency or public danger. It's the first time that the law has been used in 52 years. Critics said Mrs. Lam's move was a major step towards authoritarians for Hong Kong, which has been governed by China under a one-country, two-systems framework since British colonial rule ended in 1997. Hong Kong's protests were ignited by a now-scrapped plan to allow extraditions to the mainland, which fueled fears of an erosion of liberties promised under one country, two systems. After Beijing and local leaders took a hard line, the demonstrations snowballed into a wider movement calling for more democratic freedoms and police accountability. To Iraq now, firebrand cleric Muqtada Sadir called on the government to resign as violence spiked Friday across the country and protesters clashed with police on the fourth day of the deadly demonstrations against corruption and unemployment. Take a look. The former Shiite militia leader, whose bloc is the biggest in parliament, said in a statement that in order to avoid further deaths, the government should resign and early elections should be held under UN provision. He said he could not keep silent as Iraqi blood was being shed. Almost 100 people have died over 4 days of bloody protests across Iraq, the Iraqi Human Rights Commission said late Friday, without specifying how many were civilians or security forces. The previous toll was 60. The latest figures include 18 deaths registered at a single hospital in the capital, Baghdad. With more than 1,600 people wounded, the toll may rise further. Friday saw chaotic scenes of protests in Baghdad and other cities, with at least 10 people killed, including 2 police and 2 civilians whose security forces said were shot dead by unidentified snipers. To other news now, President Duterte has laid out in his speech the Philippine perspectives on other nations' policies in the presence of Russian President Vladimir Putin and other world leaders at the Valdai Forum. As the first ever Filipino leader executive invited to the prestigious gathering, President Duterte pointed out how the international community creates rules for almost everyone, but some refuse to be bound by them. He was blunt about human rights protection being empowered without regard to the actual adverse consequences to people they seek to protect. Take a look.
In its own way, this is the same line for nations. Developing countries like the Philippines, with their own histories, face different challenges and inner problems that would require different sets of solutions. Yet some so-called friends act like they know the answers to our problems and impervious to our specific socio-economic and political conditions. They create rules and norms for almost everyone, and some refuse to be bound by the same. Think of the UNCLOS, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and even the Convention of the Rights of the Child. They weaponize human rights, oblivious to its damaging consequences to the very people they seek to protect. Just look at the chaos and instability that ensued in Libya and Iraq following military interventions. Closer home, some of our partners have heard unfair criticism against my government about perceived excesses in our fight against drugs. They see what they want to see to justify their preconceived notions and are trying to understand that what truly is happening is there in my country. Is this how friends treat each other? We have not seen them backtrack from defense contracts over baseless apprehensions that we would use arms to violate human rights. Yet you see the same countries supplying high-end weaponry to parties whose actual human rights records leave so much to be desired.
He also clarified that he's not against the United States, given its deep ties and shared history with the Filipino people. Again, let's listen in.
Let me be very clear. I am not against the United States or the West. The U.S. is a close friend of the Philippines. In fact, our only treaty ally. We have deep ties with the American people, forged by shared history and nourished by common values. America certainly can offer so much, more than the world. Let me stress I am not against liberalism in politics and in the economy. Liberalism, to my mind, creates the best pathways to a just and fair society. For a thriving democracy like the Philippines, there is simply no other better alternative to a philosophy that puts premium on the freedom and dignity of the individual. Our issue is not the current global order, but rather the actions of certain actors that violate the very principles that underpin this order. The Philippines does not ask for a special treatment, nor favors from its partners. It does not seek exemption from the norms and principles that have kept the peace in our world for decades. What we seek, I assume, what the Russian people and all nations also desire, is fairness, equality, and mutual respect. We want a strengthened rules-based order where countries, big or small, are treated the same.
To the U.S. now, where Democratic lawmakers are demanding that the White House turn over documents related to allegations that President Trump pressured Ukraine for political favors, as the explosive impeachment investigation against the U.S. leader intensified. The congressional committees leading the probe cranked up the heat on the White House as evidence mounted that President Trump illicitly used his office to enlist Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky's help to damage 2020 Democratic rival Joe Biden in exchange for military aid. In their letter to acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, the committees demanded that he turn over the requested files by October 18. The subpoena followed a demand earlier Friday for documents from Vice President Mike Pence. The investigators pointed to Pence's knowledge of President Trump's calls to Zelensky and his own meeting on September 1 with the Ukraine leader, as well as discussions he may have had with President Trump and U.S. diplomats about Ukraine and obtaining political dirt on Biden. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo failed to meet a Friday subpoena deadline to turn in Ukraine-related documents, according to CNN, citing a House Foreign Affairs Committee aide. Adam Schiff, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, warned that refusal to comply with the document request shall constitute evidence of obstruction.
We are concerned that the White House will attempt to stonewall our investigation, much as they have stonewalled other committees in the past. It's why I say the White House needs to understand that any action like that, that forces us to litigate or have to consider litigation, will be considered further evidence of obstruction of justice.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky was told he should open an investigation sought by President Trump if he wanted an invitation to visit Washington, according to text messages published on Thursday. Take a look. President Trump is accused of pressuring Zelensky to investigate his potential 2020 election rival Joe Biden in return for $400 million in military aid, a scandal that has prompted an impeachment probe into the American president. The messages released by House Democrats show former U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker, writing to top Zelensky aide Andrei Yermak, promising the new Ukrainian leader a trip to Washington in exchange for the investigation. Heard from White House, assuming President Z convinces Trump he will investigate / get to the bottom of what happened in 2016, and we will nail down date for visit to Washington. Good luck, Volker wrote in the July 25 message. President Trump has been accused of pressuring Zelensky to open a corruption investigation against Biden in a phone call later that same day by making military aid to Ukraine contingent on that favor. Now, days before the two leaders spoke, Volker wrote in a text message to Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, that it was most important for Zelensky, quote, for Zelensky to say that he will help the investigation, unquote. The release of the text messages came the same day Volker spoke for more than 8 hours to House lawmakers in an interview centered on his role in alleged efforts by President Trump and his personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani to solicit foreign interference in the next U.S. election. A whistleblower so far, only identified as a U.S. intelligence officer, went to the authorities with concerns about the phone call between President Trump and Ukraine's leader Zelensky, triggering the impeachment inquiry. After the publication of explosive text messages showing that the U.S. had put pressure on the Ukrainian president to investigate Joe Biden, President Trump goes on the defense, leaving doubt about his cooperation with Congress in its investigations. Take a look.
I don't care about Biden's campaign, but I do care about corruption. His campaign, that's up to him. Politics, that's up to them. I don't care about politics. When I speak to foreign leaders, I speak in an appropriate way. If you notice, they don't mention the call that I had with the president of Ukraine. They don't mention that. We have a great relationship in the Senate. I have a 95% approval rating in the Republican Party. I believe the Senate, and I haven't spoken to that many senators, but I believe the senators look at this as a hoax, it's a witch hunt, it's a disgrace. Should have never happened, just like Russia collusion delusion should have never happened. But the text message that I saw from Ambassador Sondland, who's highly respected, was there's no quid pro quo. He said that. This is about corruption. And if you look and you read our Constitution and many other things, I have an obligation to look at corruption. I have an actual obligation and a duty.
And staying in the U.S., doctors confirmed that Senator Bernie Sanders suffered a heart attack 3 days ago as they announced that he had been released from the hospital in Las Vegas. Take a look. Sanders, 78, said he felt great, according to a statement from the campaign for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination. Senator Sanders was diagnosed with a myocardial infarction. His doctor said in the statement, using the medical term for a heart attack. 2 stents were placed in a blocked coronary artery in a timely fashion. All other arteries were normal. His hospital course was uneventful with good expected progress. Sanders put his bid for the White House on hold after experiencing chest discomfort while on the stump in Las Vegas on Tuesday. The far-left senator from Vermont is expected to participate in the 4th Democratic debate scheduled for October 15 in Ohio. Sanders is the oldest candidate vying to take on President Donald Trump, 73, and is third in the Democratic nominee polls behind Joe Biden, 76, and Elizabeth Warren, 70. Sanders, a self-described Democratic socialist, wants to tax the rich more and introduce universal health care. He pushed Hillary Clinton to the wire for the nomination in 2016. In other news, North Korean and U.S. officials on Saturday were set to resume nuclear talks in Stockholm after months of deadlock and Pyongyang's defiant test of a sea-launched ballistic missile this week. North Korea's Kim Yong-hil and Stephen Biegun, the special envoy of U.S. President Trump, are part of the teams at an island off Stockholm. The first cars with tinted windows started arriving just after 9 a.m. local time. North Korea frequently couples diplomatic overtures with military moves as a way of maintaining pressure on negotiating partners, according to analysts, and many believe this weapon system gives it added leverage. Pyongyang tested what it called a super large rocket on Wednesday, just hours after it said it was willing to resume working level talks with Washington. The United Nations Security Council, meanwhile, is expected to hold closed-door talks early next week on the latest test according to diplomats. Now, those talks were requested by Britain, France, and Germany as the European powers push for the world body to keep up pressure on Pyongyang, which is under heavy U.S. and UN sanctions over its weapons program. And still part of its Aid to Humanity tour in the U.S., the Iglesia Ni Cristo continues to help people who are struggling, this time in Memphis, Tennessee, donating thousands of dollars to local organizations there. Take a look.
In history, Tennessee was nicknamed as the volunteer state, and here in Memphis, Tennessee, Iglesia Ni Cristo members traveled hundreds of miles to volunteer in the Aid to Humanity project this year. While Memphis, Tennessee may be famous for its history and music, it also has one of the highest poverty rates according to the 2018 Census Bureau's American Community Survey. Today, Memphis, Tennessee was the fourth stop in the Aid to Humanity U.S. tour held by the Phyllis Y. Manalo or FYM Foundation, the charitable arm of the Iglesia Ni Cristo. The event took place at the Iglesia Ni Cristo Memphis congregation at 878 Mississippi Boulevard, where volunteers prepared and donated 2,000 free care packages of food and household goods to families in the community. The FYM Foundation also recognized 5 service organizations, which included the Porter Leaf Orphanage, the Memphis Police Department, the Memphis Firefighters Association Foundation, Booker T. Washington High School, and the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Memphis, gifting each with a $5,000 donation to support the positive social impact of their work.
This is absolutely wonderful. On behalf of the Crop Station and Memphis Police Department, I thank the Aid to Humanity and the church here and Brother Manolo for this donation. A big part of what we do as police officers is protect and serve, and that means service to others. We're out in our communities building rapport, helping those that need help, and this donation will go a long way in helping children or elderly people. Well, this is a foundation we set up to help do things for our firefighters that are outside of our budget opportunities, and we use this to do things in the community like buy smoke alarms so that people will be safer in their homes. So we really appreciate this, and I assure you it will go to good use.
We're with Porter Leaf. We're a nonprofit organization in Memphis that was founded in 1850 as an orphanage, a place where children could live and we would take care of them. And now we help children in impoverished families get their very first education, and we make sure that moms and dads have healthy babies through 6 of our programs at Porter Leaf.
We can use every donation possible to go directly into programming of our 6 programs and 2 initiatives. So every little bit really helps all of the children and families in Shelby County.
Reporting from Memphis, Tennessee, I am Elmer Gonzalez, your Eagle News correspondent, and I am 125.
Thank you, Elmery. Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
Visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Investment and trade agreements valued at $12.6 million were sealed between the Philippines and Russia during President Duterte's visit to Moscow. During the Philippine-Russian Business Forum in Moscow on Friday, Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez said that 10 agreements were signed between the Philippines and Russia. And in his speech, meanwhile, President Duterte urged Russian businessmen to invest in the Philippines. Let's listen in.
Several members of our business community have concluded 10 business agreements with their Russian partners, ranging from business cooperation, agricultural exports, importation, and electric power, with total estimated value of $12.6 million. Our coconut and fisheries industries can look forward to a resurgence as Century Pacific Food inks 3 memoranda of understanding with its Russian partners Magnet Food retail chain, Dalimo, and LLC Dalprom Riba for the exportation of tuna and sardine products to the Russian market. Furthermore, Century Pacific Agriculture Ventures signed a memorandum of understanding with Pan Asia Impex Company for the sale of coconut milk products to Russia. We thank Agriculture Secretary William Dar for his presence in the signing of these agreements. In the field of medical technology, a memorandum of agreement between Immunitas Holistic Consultants and the Institute of Practical Psychophysics was signed for the promotion, sale, and distribution of Metatron micro-MRI system to the Philippines. In the energy sector, Energy Secretary Al Cusi and Rosatom Overseas signed a memorandum that provides a framework to explore the prospects of cooperation in the construction of nuclear power plants in the Philippines. On the part of the Department of Trade and Industry, we have signed a memorandum of understanding providing for cooperation on information exchange and collaboration on business development aimed at the promotion of trade and investment between Philippines and Russia, members of Russia-ASEAN Business Council, and Philippine companies. Finally, the DTI Board of Investments inked a memorandum of intent with the Association of Industrial Parks of Russia to provide a framework of information exchange on investment environment and opportunities to attract and support foreign investments in both the Philippines and Russia.
On the Philippine-Russian economic relations, Russia is a priority trade and investment market for the Philippines. I am pleased to know that our economic exchanges are increasing. Last year, our total trade reached $1.36 billion US dollars. It has more than doubled in 2017 at $568 million US dollars. We are one of the fastest growing economies in Asia and the second fastest in ASEAN. Our economic advantage lies on the strength of our young workforce population. Our macroeconomic fundamentals remain strong. We invite because we feel that investors have shown a strong trust and confidence in my administration with record-breaking investments. We invite our Russian friends to invest and do more business in the Philippines. We offer competitive fiscal and non-fiscal incentives to jumpstart qualified investment projects from infancy to maturity of business operations.
America's jobless rate tumbled in September to its lowest level in 50 years, according to government data released on Friday, delighting the White House even though it may not assuage recession fears as President Trump's trade wars persist. Meanwhile, with a strong dollar and slowing global economy, the U.S. trade deficit widened in August as the trade conflicts ate into export growth. President Trump immediately cheered the good jobs data, claiming his economic record should shield him from efforts to impeach him, and shortly after said a trade deal with China was possible soon. But there was less than stellar news as well. The pace of job creation was the slowest in 4 months, and wages fell while the manufacturing workforce also shrank for the second time this year. Wall Street was reassured by the news, with the benchmark Dow Jones Industrial Average ending the day with a gain of 1.4%. Unemployment fell 0.2 of a point to 3.5%, matching the rate last recorded in December in 1969 and well below what analysts had forecast, according to the Labor Department. Employers added a total of 136,000 net new positions, which was below expectations, with notable slowdowns in education, government, finance, and business services. The August job gain was revised up sharply to 168,000, nearly 40,000 more than originally reported. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned North Macedonia of the risks of Chinese investments in sensitive technologies and China's bribe-heavy strategy to secure infrastructure deals during a state visit in Ohrid. Take a look.
Strong democracies must also be responsive to public concern and take firm measures to resist and defend against malign influences. The hearts and minds of North Macedonia citizens should guide your country forward, not Russian bots and trolls on social media. As I've done elsewhere in my travels in Europe, I also warned of the risks of Chinese investment in sensitive technologies and China's bribe-heavy strategy to secure infrastructure deals. We want North Macedonia to succeed, not struggle with corruption or with debt.
China has also become a target for U.S. ire because of its growing investment in the Balkans, even if the EU remains the dominant economic force. The EU accounts for more than 70% of overall direct investment in Western Balkans, far above the 1% contributed by China, according to European Commission figures. But Beijing has, in the past 6 years, leaped forward in infrastructure-related spending, rivaling the sum spent by the EU. The massive concessional loans used to fund the building sprees have drawn criticism in Brussels and Washington, who warned the poor Balkan countries are at risk of falling into a debt trap. Secretary Pompeo spoke at a press conference with North Macedonian Prime Minister Zoran Zaev after a meeting with North Macedonian President Stevo Pederovski and celebrated the two countries' diplomatic ties. UK, Britain, and Europe will have to agree a draft text next week if they are to sign an accord to avoid a chaotic no-deal divorce or another Brexit delay before this month's deadline, diplomats warned. Now, European officials insist the deadline of next Friday is not an ultimatum to Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government, but a simple fact of Brussels' diplomatic calendar. Here's what happened last week in Brexit.
Today in Brussels, we are tabling what I believe are constructive and reasonable proposals, which provide a compromise for both sides. We will, under no circumstances, have checks at or near the border in Northern Ireland. We will protect our precious union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And yes, this is a compromise by the UK, and I hope very much that our friends understand that and compromise in their turn. Then let us be in no doubt, conference, of what the alternative is. The alternative is no deal. And that is not an outcome we want. It is not an outcome we seek at all. But let me tell you, my friends, it is an outcome for which we are ready. And I know that there are some keen students of alleged divisions in my family on matters of the EU. But I want you to know, conference, that I have kept my ace up my sleeve. My mother voted leave.
I can tell you that the first reaction in the Brexit steering group was not positive. Not positive in the sense that we don't think that it is really the safeguard that islands need.
So my team met his team today and we receive legal proposal. There is progress. But to be frank, lots of work still need to be done. Reach, fill the three objectives of the backstop. No border, all island economy, and protecting the single market. We will continue to work to reach a deal. The no deal will never be the choice of the EU, never. So we will continue to reach a deal and to work with the UK team, but a deal which respect and fulfill the three commitments, the three proposals, the backstop.
The difficulty with what Prime Minister Johnson has put on the table is that, on the face of it at least, it appears to create two borders, checks in the ports and the airports, and also near the land border. And that's the difficulty that we have, and difficulty that the people in Northern Ireland have, and the business community have in Northern Ireland too. Coming to an agreement required that there would be no hard border between Ireland North and South, that the integrity of the single market of the European Union will be protected, and that the all-island economy will be protected. So I think what we need to do is refocus on those objectives and try to come to an agreement by the middle of October, which I think is possible.
I do not for one moment resile from the fact that we have shown great flexibility in the interest of reaching an accommodation with our European friends and achieving the resolution for which we all yearn. If our European neighbours choose not to show a corresponding willingness to reach a deal, then we shall have to leave on October the 31st without an agreement.
Pioneering digital payments firm PayPal on Friday said it is abandoning an alliance intended to oversee the Facebook-backed Libra cryptocurrency, which has come under attack by regulators. PayPal said, quote, it remains supportive of Libra's aspirations, but had chosen to focus on its own core businesses. The firm was one of the original members of the Libra Association, a group of 28 companies and nonprofits helping to develop Libra. Its other members include payments company Visa, ride-hailing app Uber, and humanitarian charity Mercy Corps. Now, Facebook unveiled plans in June for Libra, which will roll out in 2020 to be backed by a basket of currency assets to avoid the wild swings of Bitcoin and other virtual units. The nonprofit Libra Association, based in Geneva, will oversee the blockchain-based coin, but there have been concerns about how people's money and data will be protected, as well as over the potential volatility of the currency. Tokyo Olympic organizers rolled out a pair of chatty robots that they will put to work to assist wheelchair users at the 2020 Games as they continue to showcase Japan's cutting-edge technology. Take a look.
私はトヨタ自動車で生まれた生活支援ロボット HS
これの場面で役に立つロボットがあるんじゃないかということで、まだちょっとタイミングと具体的な中身までは決めきれていないんですけれども、そういうのも含めて、少しオールジャパンというふうに私もおっしゃいましたけれども、いろんなロボットが出てきたらいいなということで考えていきたいと思います。
車椅子のお客様にストレスなく観戦していただけるよう、ロボットによる物品の運搬や観戦席への誘導などのサポートをしていきたいと考えております。
どうぞお取りください。
Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
Tungkulin ng MTRCB ang mag-provide na
Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
In Italy, unseasonal weather events caused by climate change means beekeepers make pitiful quantities of honey that are not even enough to keep the bees alive, sparking fears for the future. Take a look.
Di miele fresco e un pochino di polline all'intorno.
Nel caso forse quest'anno per la prima volta ci siamo scontrati con un problema in termini drammatici. Non stiamo parlando soltanto di una produzione scarsa o di una produzione più ridotta rispetto a ciò che consideriamo normale in ogni zona, ma stiamo parlando di quantitativi irrisori di miele che non bastavano neppure per la sopravvivenza delle famiglie di api.
Quest'anno le produzioni sono state scarse anche pur facendo nomadismo, che significa spostare le api sulle fioriture e magari anche sulla stessa fioritura come l'acacia, spostarlo, inseguire la scalarità della fioritura per riuscire a aumentare i raccolti. Però nonostante si sia tentato di andare in più postazioni, in più posti proprio per cercare di ottimizzare il raccolto, non c'è stata produzione.
Per farlo?
At least 9 people were killed and several others missing after Typhoon Mitag lashed South Korea with heavy rains and strong winds, according to authorities. The storm hit southern parts of the country on Wednesday night, prompting flood warnings and triggering landslides in affected areas. More than 1,000 homes were damaged and over 1,500 people evacuated their houses in advance, according to the ministry. Mitag is the 18th typhoon this year and 7th to hit the Korean peninsula. Dry rivers, dying animals, family crops on the verge of extinction, and almost 600,000 people need to be supplied with water. An unprecedented drought hit central Chile after 10 years of light rains. Take a look.
Lo que nos gusta hacer a nosotros es salir y criar los animales. Y ahora salir y ver los animales en el suelo muerto es pena.
Neta tenemos para... Ahora no se puede plantar nada, ¿con qué regamos? No se puede regar ahora, no hay agua. ¿De dónde sacamos agua para regar? Alcanza apenas para lavar la ropa y para tener para el uso de la casa.
Esta es la primera advertencia y la expresión del sobreotorgamiento que existe en Chile para el agronegocio, que un 77% del agua se va ahí. ¿Cómo nos va a dejar? O sea, va a generar descensos sostenidos de los niveles de las napas subterráneas y si no se actúa ahora, vamos a terminar con los acuíferos agotados.
The number of patients suffering from probable lung injury associated with e-cigarette use has surged to more than 1,000 according to U.S. health authorities, while the death toll from the outbreak now stands at 18. Take a look. In a related news, the U.S. state of Massachusetts upheld a ban on e-cigarettes Friday amid a spate of deaths and injuries linked to vaping across the country. Take a look. 18 deaths in 15 states had now been positively linked to vaping since March, from a total of 1,080 illnesses, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Officials in Connecticut also announced a further death in that state on Friday. Massachusetts became the first American state to issue an outright ban on all e-cigarette devices in September, with the prohibition to last for 4 months. Manufacturers sought to challenge the ban in a Boston court, arguing that the law was disproportionate to the health risks posed by the devices. The Vapor Technology Association instead called for a limited prohibition on certain products, including black market refills and devices for vaping tetrahydrocannabinol, the THC, the primary psychoactive substance of marijuana. But the court rejected the application for an interim lifting of the ban, saying it would conflict with the public interest. Freddie Montero scored on a header in the 94th minute to give the Vancouver Whitecaps a 1-1 draw with the Columbus Crew in Major League Soccer. Here's Zolty Horvath for the report.
The Columbus Crew were eliminated from the playoffs after a 1-1 draw with the Vancouver Whitecaps. The Crew capitalized on the Whitecaps' mistakes with Columbus striker Jazzy Zardes scoring on a penalty shot. However, the Whitecaps never gave up and scored a 94th minute goal by Freddie Montero to tie the game. For the second game in a row, Montero scored to steal valuable points from the opposition in the standings. He talks about why he continues to fight until the last whistle and his experience with the last place Whitecaps this season.
Yes, that's soccer. During my whole career, I learned that you need to keep working. I'm on a type of forward that I need the ball into the box. That's what I can show my best. And the last two games was only one play each game that where I feel confident enough to score those goals. I have never been in MLS with a team that is out of the playoffs that far, even when I was here in 2017. So I'm learning, of course, at the age of 30 plus, you know. We need to continue believing in the process and knowing that Whitecaps next year have to come with a different mentality and different approach in the game.
The goal from Montero came on the final play of the match, and the Columbus Crew were eliminated from playoff contention with the draw. Manager Caleb Porter voiced his frustration after the late goal.
Really disappointing. Season was on the line. We're up 1-0. 10 seconds to go. We need to put the ball in the stands. These are simple things that you have to do to win games, and we do the wrong things, and it's cost us the season, honestly. If we could see a game out this year, we'd be in the playoffs. Anytime we went forward, we could have scored a goal, honestly, and we didn't. And so what do you say? At the very least, we should have seen the game out at the end. I mean, the game was done, right? The referees were waiting to blow the whistle. We have to, put the ball in the stands. We have to foul. We have to put pressure on the cross. We have to obviously pick up one of the most lethal strikers in the league. Always has been. And we don't do any of those things. And it's not the first game. And to be honest with you, I just thought overall we should have played better, especially against a team that really had nothing to play for.
Both Whitecaps and Crew have been eliminated from playoff contention and will now focus on finishing the season on a positive note. Schulte Horvath, Eagle News 1 with 25.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on Eagle News International, I'm Alma Angeles, always 1 with 25. Good night.
Hey everyone, it's Angelo. The sport of rugby has been around since the 19th century and made its mark in countries like the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. However, rugby isn't as prominent for us here in the US because of the dominating popularity of baseball, basketball,